Fantasy Sports Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this show. We started off with some young corners who I really like and will grow into the league. And we kind of talked about two guys who are underrated players in terms of IDP at their respective positions. But now we're going to talk about one of the most established veterans of the past decade, one of the best linebackers of all time. Truly, in my humble opinion, a first ballot Hall of Famer. Now playing for the Washington Commanders, where I don't know if a lot will be expected of him, but it certainly does feel that way. We are, of course, talking about the great Bobby Wagner. A player I will love forever, will stand the test of time. One of the great tacklers, one of the great sideline-to-sideline linebackers of all time. You don't want any other player sitting in the middle of your defense than Bobby Wagner. And I truly appreciate all the years he spent at Seattle. Now going to a Washington Commanders team who's looking for consistency at every level of their defense. And I think they made a nice little move here in acquiring the veteran presence of Bobby Wagner. However, there's still a lot of caveats, especially when it comes to age and how he'll fit into the Washington Commanders system. Without further ado, let's just go over a highly illustrious career in real life and in fantasy for Bobby Wagner. 1,800.7 fantasy points he accrued. 2015 was his best fantasy year with 172.7 points. Last year just shows that he still kind of has it. 96 solo tackles. He's always up there in terms of the tackling department. 11 TFLs, 4 sacks, 3 passes defended. And we love you and appreciate you, Bobby, for all that you've done for Seattle. And now let's talk about how he fits into Washington. Now, Washington certainly is a team that can be one of the better defenses in years to come. And I say this with full honesty and closure because of the fact that they're young. They know what pieces they need to fill in order for these young players to learn and improve. And when the time comes for them to lead this team. But right now, Bobby Wagner coming into this building really makes a lot of sense in many ways just for his veteran leadership and presence. But also there are some concerns that I might have about where he fits in and how he profiles into this young Commanders team. Especially when we look at their linebacker core. So, with all intents and purposes, Bobby Wagner will play the Mike linebacker position, the middle of the defense, the quarterback of the defense overall. No questions about it. Jamin Davis is a young guy. He can be the strong side, the Sam. He can be the Will. What I love about Jamin Davis is he's long, rangy, and he plays like a coverage man, but he also is an effective blitzer. And so, I really think that adding Bobby Wagner will help Jamin Davis the most in that linebacker group. And then you also have a guy in Frankie Louv who has been around the league, who's kind of like a pit bull kind of guy. He is going to be the main kind of sideline-to-sideline player on the weak side, who plugs gaps, stops the run, gets huge tackles, and is seen as kind of the stronger, more physical linebacker, even though he plays more of a will role. So then the question remains, what role will Bobby Wagner have in this defense? Because when I think of Bobby Wagner, I think of a guy who constantly is at the point of attack. No matter who the ball carrier is, he's always going to be in and around the area of when the tackle is made. And so, thinking about him now in this defense is kind of weird to contemplate. Because if you have one guy who's going to constantly blitz or sim pressures, you have a guy who's kind of going to cover the sideline, be your everyman, be a run plugger. Will Bobby Wagner fit more into a stationary role? Because That's the only way I see him. And especially for someone of his age, for someone who can't move like he has in previous years, I'm really thinking of, well, does this move really make sense with how we want to play for this year? Because when I look at the Washington Commanders, there's opportunity here. They might not be the best team in the NFC East, but they're certainly building something where they have a culture and identity on the offense. They look to have some depth and experience for their young rookie quarterback in Jaden Daniels. And on the defensive side of the ball, they're really building something exciting at every level. I really, really like their interior defensive line with the duo of Daron Payne and Jonathan Allen. That's one of the most highly underrated interior pairings in the league. And I look at the rest of Washington's defense. I see young guns. I see players who are going to excite for many years. I think Emmanuel Forbes, if he bulks up, will be a solid corner who I'll talk about maybe in a couple of years' time. But when I look at Bobby Wagner, I look at a guy who, yes, he contributes. Yes, he can tackle unlike anyone else. But you have two solid pieces at the linebacker position that are already improving on their own. And so I think Bobby Wagner is just going to have to be a stationary guy. He's going to have to see how Davis and Louisville move around him in order to interpret his own role, because right now I really don't see a role outside of quote-unquote Mike linebacker for him. He probably can help in terms of run stopping, but I don't necessarily see it. And they definitely have the players up front to mitigate for if Bobby Wagner's age shows. But I just don't see the overall fit, because Bobby Wagner is certainly a fit player. When you add him to your defense, a lot of things have to change. And I don't necessarily think he's that force anymore, because we saw last year the only reason why he had so many tackles was because the Seahawks were a young team and they were still trying to figure things out. And, there was very little communication there. But in Washington Commanders defense, they're starting to get serious. They're starting to build something that they believe in. I think that Bobby Wagner can be a voice in the locker room, but he can't be a contributor on the field. That will immediately hurt this team. If Bobby Wagner's age shows. And I hate to say it, because he does have fantastic traits that you really want to focus on, and the Washington Commanders really want to focus on. But that's the main question right now. What possible way can he fit into this structure in a way that makes sense? What do you really see in him that says that not only is he going to be a vocal leader, but a leader on the field? And right now, I'm the Washington Commanders. I would have said, hey, we have two interior linemen in Daron Payne and Allen who can generate pressure and do their own thing. And Jamin Davis and frankly Louvu are going to be studs for us. I probably would not have made this move if I were in the shoes of the Washington Commanders GM, but hey, it's a new regime. It's a new feel to the Washington Commanders, so I can't necessarily fault them. But you definitely start having to thinking about how you play, because it's nice to have a presence. It's nice to have the aura of someone who knows what it takes to play the linebacker position. It's nice to have someone as a defensive anchor. But it won't mean anything if he can't play at the highest level for you. I think Washington right now, I would have them third in that division, but hey, maybe in 3 to 5 years' time, I'll be saying they're contending for that NFC East title. And it would really be telling if Bobby Wagner kind of hindered that growth. Maybe it will take a little bit longer if Bobby Wagner doesn't show it. Because right now, the Washington Commanders have the desire to win. But does Bobby Wagner coming in muddle it all up? In terms of IDP, he might still get a lot of tackles for you guys, so he could be someone that you covet in later rounds. But I just don't see it. It just doesn't make sense to me. And it saddens me because he's ultimately a legend, but that's just the way it is, and that's what the Washington Commanders saw in him. We have to live with that. That'll just about do it for today's show. Hope you enjoyed it. Like, follow, and subscribe to the show and the network as a whole. It is a huge support to both me and my fellow podcasters in the network. Leave a tip and donation at the link gsmc.cloud if you do feel so inclined. Other than that, I've been Christopher Shepard. Thank you guys for tuning in to the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast. We'll be back better than ever tomorrow to close out the week. Thank you guys yet again for tuning in.